Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 670, and today's date is May 18th, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Slides Back into a Recession Towards a Major Depression. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Greece, they're basically bankrupt, and we see that IMF is discussing with the Greek government about Cyprus-like plan to bail in the banks. And we all knew that eventually this would occur because right now Cyprus has no money. They're working out deals with the IMF, working out deals with the ECB. They can't come to any type of agreement. We understand later in June they're going to meet with the BRIC nations. They're going to meet with Russia. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully because we're coming to a point where they're going to have to make a decision. And I know that Greece is having a referendum and the people are going to vote, should we stay with the EU or should we leave the EU at this time? And we know that the IMF has been making plans for a default and for Greece leaving the Eurozone. And time is running out for Greece at this point in time because they cannot make it. Varoufakis was out there saying, listen, we do not have enough to make the next payment whatsoever. So we're going to have to watch this situation very carefully and see what happens here. Now, we noticed here in the United States that gas prices now are increasing. I've noticed at the pump, I see out in Los Angeles, the price of gas is basically almost up to $4 once again, and prices are basically creeping up. And no matter how much Saudi Arabia continually pumps out and floods the market, prices are still going up at this time. And it looks like they might be cutting back on that because we see that the United States is now making nice with Russia, or are they? We'll talk about that in a little bit later. Now, here in the United States, we understand that retail is completely falling apart. It's imploding on itself because right now Americans are tapped out. They just don't have the funds to go out there and make those big purchases. They don't even have enough money to make those small purchases. But, of course, the U.S. government, the central bankers are out there trying to convince us that, no, they can still purchase. All they need is a credit card and they can just add up the debt. But guess what? People right now have so much debt, they can't make those small little payments anymore. And we understand at this point in time that this whole thing is starting to crumble apart. I mean, think about this. 1 out of every 4 American households spend half of their incomes just to cover the rent or mortgage. Needless to say, that doesn't leave much for the shopping mall. And this is one of the reasons why people are not going out. You have to remember, these people came from high-paying jobs. They couldn't find those jobs. They're at part-time jobs. Now, is this every single person in the country? No. So all those people who are out there going, oh, well, I have a great job. Yes, there are still people that have good jobs. But this next round of layoffs and this next collapse, hold on tight. Hopefully nothing happens to you. But we've seen this before, where people thought they were secure in their jobs. They weren't really worrying, and those were the people that were let go. I mean, there are other examples of why the economy is not improving, why retail sales are continually falling. The labor force participation rate is at 38-year lows right now. With almost 1 in 3 Americans not in the workforce, that's over 93 million people completely not working. And the other people who are working are not making the salaries. They're working at part-time jobs at this time. And it's very, very difficult to make it today. So what are we seeing? U.S. retailers are having problems. We already understand that 6,000 stores are going to be closing this year. They've already closed. Thousands upon thousands of stores closed last year. We understand last holiday, the last Black Friday, Cyber Monday were a complete disaster, and that's during the hot time of the retail market. We're heading into the summer, which is not the hot time for retail. It's hot for real estate, but not for retail. And we're starting to see things start to really slow down now. And a lot of economists are out there looking at the situation, looking at the numbers, saying, yeah, we are back in recession at this point. But of course, the U.S. government central bankers, they're not going to admit that. They only admit that once the market comes crashing down. And we might see that occur very soon. Now, there's a lot of people talking about this fall. Or if it doesn't happen this fall, I can't believe that we will make it through next year. I believe it's going to happen very, very quickly, and the whole entire system is going to come down. And this time, these big banks, who are completely insolvent at this time, cannot be bailed out. So they will be bailing in. They will be going into the accounts to take the money. And we see this happening in Greece right now. The test case was Cyprus. And we know that this is going to spread throughout all the European countries, here in the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. It will spread. Home builder sentiment is down once again. May printed at 54. They were expecting 57. Despite all the previous hope for future sales, traffic has fallen. It's drying up at this time. The Midwest saw the biggest drop in sentiment at this time. Consumers are exhibiting caution. This is coming from the NAHB chief economist David Crow saying they're cautious right now before they go ahead and make this big purchase. No, people are just not going and making the purchase because they don't have the funds. They're nervous. They see where the economy is headed, and it's headed for a major collapse. This is what people are nervous about. People feel it. You know when there's something wrong. I mean, the government can tell you that everything is absolutely fine and everything's going perfectly. But you know it, you feel it, you understand it when something's not going right. And then when the economy's not going right, you say, I haven't received a raise. I know a friend that got laid off. I'm looking for a job. I can't find one. This is stuff that this is right in front of you, and nobody can talk you out of that the economy is doing well. And I know a lot of people that are having a very tough time finding work. Those people coming out of college having a very difficult time. Yes, a lot of them are getting the part-time jobs, but they need to live with their parents. They have a lot of student loan debt. And talking about student loan debt is basically one of the highest form of debt that has the highest rate of delinquency right now. A large portion of this recovery here in the United States came from student loans and automobile loans. That's it. It didn't come from the everyday person going out and purchasing. These are the two things that the government could control. They tell everyone to go back to school. You can get a great job. So people listen and they do it. They take out the student loans. Colleges become more expensive. You can't pay for this in cash, so you take out loans. They start accepting people who have subprime credit to go into the auto industry. They take out the loan. They get the car they always wanted. They stretch the payments over 7, 8, 9 years. Everything seems fine until they can't pay for it. And this is what's happening right now. So right now, this economy has been basically propped up by debt, not economic growth. Basically, it's all debt. And again, garbage in, garbage out. And this is what we're seeing. I mean, right now, the student loans are about 1.2 trillion. And we can see right now that the number of delinquent people is continually rising. And this is why Obama was out there telling everyone that they have new programs, that they can defer your loan, they can help you refinance your loan, because they're starting to realize that these people can't pay it back. And guess what? You can't write it off. This is why he's trying to change this. He wants people to go bankrupt. He wants people to write it off. This way the government can bail the student loan debt problem out. But right now, they cannot do that. We see manufacturing in this country falling apart. It is not getting better whatsoever. We understand the Baltic Dry Index, which is the shipment of raw material to factories. When the factories are producing, they order more raw material. This is used for goods and other products, and it's sold all across the world. And what we're seeing right now is that since the people aren't buying, companies aren't purchasing, factories aren't producing. They don't need the raw material. Now, we've seen the Baltic Dry Index go up a little bit. This was because of these high capsize rates. Now it's starting to fall down again. It's at 630. It's down 4 points once again. And every time it's propped up by higher rates, it seems to drop down once again. Here, as we know, we discussed this before, the world debt right now is about $200 trillion. And the debt to GDP ratio for the entire world is about 286%. All major economies today have higher levels of borrowing relative to GDP than they did in 2007. And here in the United States, we can see that the debt here has increased. It has not slowed down. It has not decreased. When Obama came into office, what was it? 9 trillion? What is it today? 17, 18 trillion. By the time he's done, it'll be 20 trillion. It's just getting worse. It is not getting better. Maybe the reason why things aren't getting better is because we keep all those government so-called officials or leaders in office. I mean, there are 79 members of Congress that have been there for at least 20 years. That's a very long time. The list includes Harry Reid, Dianne Feinstein, McConnell, McCain, Pelosi, Boehner, Rangel, Boxer. I can't believe 20 years the voters are like, wow, this person's doing a great job. Let's keep them in office for the next 20 years. Does that make any sense to anybody? It doesn't to me. What makes sense to me is that this is completely rigged. They pay for their votes. They stay in office. There's no democracy whatsoever. And we definitely see this. We understand the U.S. government, central bankers, along with the FBI, CIA, NSA, have all been spying on the American people. They use it to blackmail judges. They use it to have the votes changed in Senate, just like the TPP vote. One day, the Senate was like, no, we're not going to fast track this. The next day, all of a sudden, people changed their vote, and now it's looking like they're going to fast track it. And it looks like they might have had something on some of these senators where they might have received a call and said, hey, we need you to vote a certain way, or we will release this information. We saw this with Obamacare, with the judge who said this is completely unconstitutional. We understand that the FBI is out there, and we understand they use a Stingray surveillance system. This is a fake tower that intercepts your phone call, and they do this without any type of search warrant. Until recently, the FBI didn't want to disclose the Stingray surveillance system. And now they're saying that law enforcement is not prohibited by the FBI from disclosing use of the Stingray. That we never, no, with the NDA that we had them sign had nothing to do with that. They can disclose this if they want. But what they're doing right now is they know the local law enforcement does not want to disclose this Stingray device because all their data they collected, all the surveillance they collected is without a search warrant. And once a judge sees this, they're going to throw it out. And right now we understand that the Stingray device has been given to a lot of local law enforcement. They've been using it, spying on the local people, and they have not been using a search warrant whatsoever. This is in complete violation of the Fourth Amendment. But of course, as we know, they're continually doing it. They're nonstop, and they will not stop. We see Denmark is out there, and Denmark Security and Intelligence Service, PET, may soon be able to obtain detailed airline passenger information without a court order. The country's intelligence service would also be granted rights to share this data with foreign partners if it believes that a possible terrorist is heading from Denmark to another country. The new surveillance bill comes as part of the Danish government's recent anti-terrorism crackdown. And of course, the bill has drawn criticism from anti-surveillance activists and other people, because we're starting to see the same thing occur in almost all of these countries. They have some terror. That was a false flag event. They introduce new bills. They infringe on people's rights. They take them away, of course, for your safety and security. And now they can just take your information and send it wherever they want. They can spy on you. They can search you. And it seems like every country is going down this path. I mean, look at France, look at Canada, look at Australia, look at Belgium, look at the United States, UK, Spain, Italy. All of these countries are doing it. And the reason why they're doing this is because they're getting ready for the major collapse that is coming. They want troops on the ground. They want a force that can control the people, because people are not going to be able to handle what is going on. And when the system comes crumbling down, they realize people are not going to have work. The governments are not going to be able to support them. The value of their currency is going to plummet. And people are going to be very upset, and they're very nervous and worried, these government officials, the central banks, that they're going to come after them. So they need security forces to keep them back. And this is what we are seeing today. We see that in a lot of these countries, government officials are beefing up security around government buildings. They are getting prepared. We see the United States. They are trying to provoke a war. They need a war to cover up this collapse. They need some type of an event, because the central bankers, the U.S. government, they do not want to be blamed for what's coming. And neither do the other governments. But mainly it's the United States, because this is where the Fed basically creates all this money. This is where it all springs from. And we can see right now they're out in the Pacific, provoking China. They're starting to provoke North Korea again. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is now warning North Korea of new sanctions on the North Korean government because of their provocation and grotesque executions. Well, isn't Saudi Arabia an ally of the United States government? And haven't they just beheaded many, many people? Well, they have gross executions. They do the same thing. So why aren't we out there placing sanctions on Saudi Arabia? Oh, because they're bought and paid for. North Korea isn't. They don't have a central bank in there. They're not tapped into their natural resources. The dollar is not being used for anything in North Korea, and they want North Korea. And this is why they're placing sanctions on North Korea. Even though Obama told us with Cuba, sanctions don't work because we tested them throughout 50 years or so, and they just don't work. But they're continually placing sanctions on all these countries: Venezuela, North Korea, Iran, Syria, Russia. They're continually doing this. Brazil, Argentina, non-stop, continuing with sanctions. And if they haven't placed sanctions yet on these countries, they will, if these countries do not do what they want. Now, out in Ukraine, we are seeing that the United States right now has just signed a loan guarantee for $1 billion for Ukraine to help them out through their economic disaster that the United States created. And in every single country, we see the same exact thing. The United States goes in, they destroy the country, they create a humanitarian need in that country, people end up starving, losing their jobs, the economy tanks, there's war, and the United States continually pumps in billions and billions of dollars into that country instead of spending it here in the United States. But you have to remember, they've signed loan agreements because what the central bankers want, they want to push their debt out to other countries. This is how it works. This is how they profit. Their product is debt, and the repayment with interest is their income, is their revenue, is their profit. So they need to continually push this out to more and more countries. Now we see Victoria Nuland is meeting with Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Grigory Karasin. Hopefully I pronounced his name correctly. And she is working with Russia on the Minsk II agreement. Now, let's just get this straight here. Ukraine had a coup d'etat. Basically, Victoria Nuland, she was one of them who orchestrated the entire coup d'etat. Had the people ready to go in place for the new government. Yatsenyuk was one of them. Spent about $5 billion. She was caught on a phone recording, setting the whole thing up. And now they have that same person in Russia trying to negotiate the Minsk II ceasefire agreement, saying, yes, the United States will get involved. Now, why is all of this happening at this time? Well, we've heard from the commanders, from the trainers in Ukraine who are training the forces. They are not ready. It's a mess. And they understand this, so they're buying time. We've seen this before. We've seen this in Syria after the peace talks with Russia where Assad gave up all his chemical weapons. The United States government, central bankers, stepped back and they reformulated a plan. They basically looked at the situation and they created a whole new plan to get back into Syria. Now, if you really look, going back to August 2013, they wanted to bomb Syria and give the Free Syrian Army a way to get to Damascus. What are they doing today? The same exact thing, except they call them the Islamic State, which is really the same, all basically the same thing. It's a proxy army. They're flying, shooting missiles into Syria, paving the way for the forces to get to Damascus. They're doing the same thing in Ukraine. They're using this to stall at this time. Remember, the goal is always the same. They might change tactics. Now, as we can see, Victoria Nuland, she is working with Russia, and she came out and said that she's 100% opposed to U.S. plans to arm Kiev. Really? After she orchestrated the entire coup d'etat. She says arms supplies to all parties in the conflict in Ukraine must be stopped, but the United States has yet to see that happen. She's saying that Russia needs to stop this. Russia needs to get the troops out of Ukraine. But we see troops in Ukraine from the United States. But she says nothing about that. Very interesting. And we can see right now this is a stall tactic. It looks very good in the corporate media. It looks like the United States is working with them. Almost like the United States working with Assad with the Geneva II talks, where they had the Geneva II talks. They both sat down with the Free Syrian Army and the Assad government, and the only thing that was on the plate was, Assad, you need to step down. Assad. And the corporate media blew it out, saying, look, blew out of proportion, saying, yes, the United States wants peace, but Assad's not cooperating. We're going to see the same thing here. They're going to stall. They're going to use whatever tactics. And again, they're getting prepared. They just aren't ready yet because they're looking at what they have to work with, and the troops are just not ready. They're continually still having weapons come in. They're continually having loans that are being signed off to support Ukraine, and the central bankers have not gotten what they paid for just yet. So right now they're taking a pause. And as they take this pause, you can see they're provoking in different areas of the world. Spratly Islands and North Korea now. We see Poroshenko is out there, and it looks like he got a little bit of a talking to, saying, listen, let's tap this down a little bit. We got to make it look like we're working with them for the Minsk II agreement. So he's out there saying that there is no alternative to complete fulfillment of the Minsk agreements, and this is a clear position coordinated with the United States and with our Normandy partners. Basically, it's a lot of lip service. And we can see while this is all being said, Ukraine forces are still shelling the Donetsk area. They're still shelling the airport, and they've recorded the forces shelling that area about 20 times already. Poroshenko is out there, and he's saying it is very important for Ukraine to regain control over the border with Russia. I wonder how they're going to do that. Of course, as we know, they're spending a lot of money on building a wall to keep Russia out. We see the rebels are saying that Ukraine, right now their army is setting up field depots with 2,000 tons of ammunition. And if this is the case, it's in violation of the Minsk II agreement once again. Now, of course, there's no penalties on Kiev. They can do whatever they want. They can bring their military assets right up to the contact line. Makes no difference. They can shell. It makes no difference. The OSCE records it. There's no penalties. There's no sanctions. If the southeastern people do something and it's recorded or something happens, the United States then sanctions Russia. But we're going to have to watch to see how this all turns out. We see Kiev is out there, and they're pushing the agenda that they've captured 2 Russian war criminals. They're saying that, yes, we found the Russian soldiers, 2 of them, and we've captured, and they did this once before where they actually went over the border a little bit, or the soldiers crossed over because there's really no border line, and they got them. And right now, Lugansk people are saying, no, these are not Russian soldiers. They fight for us. Here are their IDs, and we would like them returned. And of course, Kiev is saying, listen, we'll give you the 2 Russian war criminals for 400 Ukrainian POWs. And this is the swap they're trying to make. But of course, the corporate media is all out. They are trying to convince everyone that, yes, we have captured them. And even if they did, it's 2 soldiers that are in Ukraine. Actually, there are officers in Ukraine, and actually, Kiev asked Russian officers to come in to help with the Minsk II agreement. Of course, that was not broadcasted all over the corporate media. They keep that kind of quiet. And right now, these 2 soldiers, they don't work for the Russian government. They're not signed up as Russian soldiers. They're signed up as Lugansk soldiers. Now, of course, those people speak Russian. They have their IDs. But we're going to have to see how this plays out and where this goes. Maybe they'll just return the people just like they return the other soldiers. But what's very interesting about this is they will only let certain news reporters in to report the story. No outside reporters are allowed, and that raises some red flags for me. Now, we see that France is still holding on to those Mistral ships. Russia would like them. They had a contract with them. They paid for them. And Russia's out there saying, listen, if you can't deliver these, we want some money for this, because if you're going to cancel the contract, you owe us about $1.32 billion for canceling this contract. Now, you have to remember the United States is putting a lot of pressure on France not to deliver these ships. France would like to deliver these ships, but they cannot at this point because they're listening to the United States government central bankers. And Russia is out there saying, listen, we've gotten past the deadline. We've been very patient, and now we would like our money if this is being canceled. And we're going to have to see what France does at this time. Now, we understand out in Japan, the United States government central bankers would love to move a base to a different location. This way they can bring in more advanced military assets. We see the people there have been protesting. They're out there with tens of thousands of people saying, we do not want this to occur. And the Okinawa governor has demanded that, you know what? All the flights from the Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft needs to be suspended at this time. There was a crash of an Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft that crashed in Hawaii over the weekend. They saw this and they're saying, listen, this is a problem. We understand we're getting more of these aircrafts delivered, and we do not want them flying around this area because they are unsafe. And the people are definitely speaking up saying, listen, we do not want the base moved. We don't want this military assets in this area. But the government is not listening to the people. They're doing whatever they want, and they're continually pushing this. We see the United States now has been pushing another color revolution. And this is in Macedonia. Why are they doing this? Well, it looks like basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to stop the Turkish Stream pipeline that's going to run through Macedonia. It's going to come up through Greece, and they're trying to have a revolution there at this time. Soros, NGOs, and some Western powers are behind this, and they are really pushing it. And we can see that the main strategy is to overthrow the government using a color revolution. But if that doesn't work, they have other plans. They might be using unconventional war modeled off the Syria template. So we could see that going on for a very long time. And if there is war, the pipeline will not be able to stretch through this country. And we can see right now they're staging everything. They're getting ready for it. And they've been doing it. There's been protests. They want the leader to step down at this time. And this might really go south quickly. It might turn violent, and we're going to have to watch the situation. But it seems that most of the people in Macedonia and Albania and surrounding, they're catching wind of what is going on, and they're starting to realize that, yeah, this is a color revolution. This is not being done by the people there. This is from outsiders starting this up. We saw it happen in China. They were going to do it in Venezuela. That was squashed. They did it in Ukraine, and look where they are today. And here the United States is once again doing the same thing. They're trying to stop the pipeline coming out of Greece through Macedonia. And Greece is looking at this situation going, are we next? Because if it doesn't work there, they're going to come to Greece and try the same exact thing. So we're going to have to watch this situation very, very closely, because we see the United States government central bankers, they are up to their old tricks once again. And again, every time they go into a country, they do this. There's a humanitarian crisis. The United States, we will give aid to that country. And all of a sudden, billions of dollars start pouring in to the country. The government then is thrown out. They have a puppet government installed. And basically, they just say, no pipeline in this country. Then they move to the next country. And we can see how they are progressing and how they are doing this. When they don't want something to happen, this is what the central bankers do. Now, we understand the P5+1 deal is going forward. And again, this has nothing to do with nuclear weapons. Iran does not have nuclear weapons, even though Israel, United States have been complaining about Iran developing nuclear weapons, and they're going to have them in 3 to 5 months. They've been saying this for 30 years now, and Iran has never produced any type of nuclear weapon whatsoever. We see that the coalition, the Gulf State Coalition forces, are very upset about this. They do not want the P5+1 deal to go through. We see Israel is very upset about this because they would like to get into Iran along with the United States. And we can see that Obama made some promises about a missile shield and ballistic missiles for a missile shield to protect them against the non-existent nuclear weapons. And we see Saudi Arabia right now is threatening to launch a nuclear weapons program of their own in retaliation for any P5+1 deal. And basically, Veterans Today is out there saying, well, that's not actually true that they're going to launch their own nuclear weapon and nuclear program and create nuclear weapons, because they have already bought nuclear weapons from Israel, and they're saying they already have them, because we know Israel, because of the unclassified CIA documents of 1987, they have nuclear weapons, over 200. And they sold some to Saudi Arabia. They've just been keeping it a secret. And you have to remember, these countries aren't part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They don't have IAEA inspections. but they're holding nuclear weapons. We see out in Yemen, there's a ceasefire which actually ended, but before that time period, we see Saudi jets were firing on the UNICEF aid ships. We see Saudi Arabia was bombing the Yemen capital in violation of the truce. And Kerry was out there saying, the Houthi movements are making the ceasefire very, very difficult because they're moving around and we can't coordinate where they are at this time. And this was part of Kerry's deal, not the Houthis' deal, where they cannot move because they wanted to get fixes on where they were. And we see now that the Yemen puppet government and Saudi Arabia begin having dialogues about what is going on in Yemen, but the Houthis aren't included. It reminds me of what goes on in Ukraine, where everyone's having a discussion, but the southeastern people are left out. The same thing is happening in Yemen. So this is really not a discussion whatsoever. This is just the puppet president who's been thrown out of his country having talks with Saudi Arabia, who's bombing Yemen. But they're having no real talks with the Yemeni people. And the UN Yemen envoy, he's calling for an extension of the ceasefire. Because as we know, this ceasefire is now over. And we're just waiting to see what Saudi Arabia and the United States does at this point. And you know what they're going to end up doing. They're getting prepared for more strikes. And most likely they will be going in with ground troops. Now it looks like there's a 19-page strategy paper to go into Libya. And we understand that Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, they all have the same problem. The people are rising up. They want their country back. And as soon as the people push it too far, this is when the U.S. government central bankers step in. And of course, they use proxy forces like Saudi Arabia to do their dirty work. Because right now, the United States can't get into these countries because they do not have the authorization for war. But this 19-page strategy paper for the mission obtained by The Guardian focuses on air and naval campaign in the Mediterranean and Libyan territorial waters. But it adds that ground operations in Libya may be needed to destroy those people who are smuggling oil out of the country. Basically what they're saying is those people who taken control of Libya, they are out there putting oil on ships and selling it to other nations not using the dollar, and they do not like this. 10 European Union members have already expressed their approval, including Great Britain, France, Spain, and Italy. Libya's shoreline is about 1,100 miles in length, and they're going to need a large naval force to control the oil leaving Libya. And this is what they're getting prepared for, because the time has come where the people have taken back their country, they're producing oil, they're selling it, and now the central bankers need to put a stop to this. And this is what all these countries are doing at this time. Now, there is a security researcher, Chris Roberts of One World. He has been speaking to the FBI, and we talked about this in previous reports where they're saying that the computer systems of an airplane can be hacked and they would be able to basically control the plane or make it crash. And he's saying that yes, he went ahead and he did this. He was able to basically increase the thrust of one of the engines, making it change course. He was able to basically make the plane climb, resulting in a lateral or sideways movement. He said he did this about 15 times during flights, but really didn't go beyond observing data traffic. And if this is true, that means anybody can get into these systems and control these planes. Now, of course, as we know, the U.S. government central bankers are planning some type of an event. We also understand a lot of these planes have remote control systems on them where they can control them, and they don't even need passengers or a flight crew on the plane to fly these planes. And basically, they can just have one of these planes or maybe a plane that they have sitting someplace else, and they can just go ahead and use this plane for an event. And we see that the White House is now starting to step up their warnings about terrorism on U.S. soil. They are alarmed about the growing threat from the Islamic State. The Obama administration has dramatically stepped up warnings of potential terrorist attacks on American soil after several years of saying, no, we do not have to worry. Now, all of a sudden, they're saying, yes, there is a threat. U.S. authorities have raised defenses at U.S. military bases. Local police now are on full alert. And they've increased surveillance at the nation's airports, railroads, shopping malls, energy plants, and other potential targets. We see the Islamic State. They've released a video. And of course, as we know, this is a proxy army for the United States government central bankers to convince everyone that there are terrorists, to convince everyone that they're coming for us, to keep us in fear, to give up our rights. And we've been talking about this for a very long time, but this hooded actor released a video stating that the Islamic State was ready and prepared to wage an all-out electronic war on the U.S. and Europe. But they're saying the war has not begun yet. They're saying that they will hit key infrastructure points in the West, such as power stations, transport networks, government medical facilities, and they will bring the West to its knees. So the propaganda has already started. They're getting ready to convince everyone that this is coming. And we knew this was coming for quite a while. We've been talking about this, and we can see how this is really starting to build up now. Where now it's not the government officials saying it's going to be a cyber 9/11 or a virtual Pearl Harbor. We're starting to see the actual so-called terrorists tell us that they are going to do it. And of course, as we know, this will be an inside job. They already have agents standing by, waiting for the green light. The malware has already been planted in the financial systems, in the electrical grid. And when we look back in time, we can see they actually did have some dry runs. They had physical attacks out in California, where there were these lone gunmen who were able to bring down the power station there. We had the power outage on the East Coast in 2003, which really couldn't be explained. And I think these were all test runs, just like when they had the test run before 9/11. They had a bomb in the basement. And we can see at this point in time, they're getting ready. They have the actors all set up, the Islamic State, Russia, China, North Korea, because they've been telling us that they've been hacking into our systems, that they've found malware, that they know that it's definitely them. They have all the proof they need, they just can't show us, because we know it's fake. And we can see right now the kill switches are in place for the BATS, NASDAQ, and stock market. They're setting up a disaster site in Chicago. NORAD is basically renovating Cheyenne Mountain to go into Cheyenne Mountain. So they're getting prepared. And now we have the release on video from the United States government central bankers terrorist group telling us that they're getting ready and they're almost there to wage electronic war. It's coming very soon. The collapse is coming very soon. The economy cannot survive the way it is. It is collapsing, and they know this. And they've been trying to prop it up. It hasn't been working. You have to remember, the U.S. government, the central bankers, they're just people. Things don't go as planned because everyone doesn't cooperate around the world. And when they try to do something, they have to switch off and use a different tactic. They've done this many, many times. It seems like, okay, that tactic didn't work, so now they're looking to have peace, that they're stepping back and saying, you know what, now we'll have peace. No, all they're doing is they're recalculating. They're replanning. They're getting ready for their next move. They just need time. And this is what we see happening in Ukraine. We saw it happen in Syria. And now they're starting to realize they're running out of this time, and things are really starting to fall apart. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.